The crystalline trees of Arcturus sang in the morning wind, their translucent branches creating a symphony of chimes that echoed across the vast forest. Each tree was a living monument to precision, grown over centuries by the planet's inhabitants who had elevated archery from mere skill to sacred art. The branches formed natural targets at varying heights and distances, shifting with the breeze to create an ever-changing challenge for those who sought mastery. Above the forest canopy, floating platforms drifted like enormous lily pads on an invisible pond. These aerial arenas, held aloft by anti-gravity generators buried deep within their organic cores, served as the ultimate proving grounds for the planet's elite archers. It was on one such platform that Lyra Skyborn stood, her silver-blue hair whipping in the high-altitude winds as she surveyed the gathering crowd below. The off-worlder arrives today. Her mentor, Master Theron, said as he approached. His weathered face bore the marks of countless battles, and his right eye had been replaced with a targeting implant that glowed softly in the morning light. "The Council expects you to make a good impression." Lyra's lips curved into a confident smile. "When have I ever failed to impress?" She drew her bow in one fluid motion, the weapon singing as she pulled the string taut. Without seeming to aim, she released, and her arrow struck a crystal branch 300 meters away, causing it to ring out a perfect C note. "Your skill is unquestioned," Theron acknowledged, "but diplomacy requires more than a perfect shot." "Diplomacy is for those who can't win through strength," Lyra replied, already nocking another arrow. "The Skyward clan has dominated the Trial of 12 for 3 generations. Why should we bow to some slow-moving grounder from the stars?" Theron's expression hardened. "Because the galaxy is larger than Arcturus, young one, and our isolation has cost us. The technology that keeps our platforms aloft grows old. The bioengineers who created our Arrowhawks are long dead. We need allies." As if summoned by his words, a piercing cry split the air. Lyra's Arrowhawk, Stormwing, descended from the clouds with grace that defied physics. The genetically engineered falcon's wingspan stretched nearly 2 meters, its feathers a shifting pattern of blues and grays that made it nearly invisible against the sky. It landed on Lyra's outstretched arm, depositing an arrow it had caught mid-flight during her morning practice. "Good girl," Lyra cooed, stroking the creature's neck. Stormwing's eyes, larger than any natural falcon's, fixed on her with an intelligence that went beyond mere animal cunning. The bond between Archer and Arrowhawk was sacred on Arcturus, formed through a neural link established at birth. Stormwing could anticipate Lyra's shots, retrieve arrows from impossible angles, and even redirect them mid-flight with precise wing movements. The sound of approaching hovercraft drew their attention, a diplomatic shuttle, its hull bearing the insignia of the Galactic Alliance, descended toward the landing platform adjacent to their training ground. Lyra watched with barely concealed disdain as the vessel's design revealed its origin: functional, utilitarian, lacking any of the artistic flair that characterized Arcturus technology. "Come," Theron said. "Let us meet this Jax Marlowe and see what the stars have sent us." They descended from the platform using gravity slides, channels of controlled anti-gravity that allowed for rapid vertical movement. The technology was another remnant of Arcturus's golden age, when their ancestors had combined biological engineering with advanced physics to create wonders. Now, few understood how the systems worked. They simply maintained them and prayed they would not fail. The landing platform was crowded with representatives from both major cultures of Arcturus. The Skyward clan stood tall and proud, their clothing adorned with feathers and their hair styled to catch the wind. They carried their bows openly, each one a masterwork of craftsmanship passed down through generations. The ground-bound tribes, by contrast, wore practical leather and cloth, their weapons concealed but no less deadly. Where the Skyward valued aesthetics and aerial supremacy, the ground-bound had survived centuries in the dangerous crystal forests. developing skills that emphasized stealth and adaptation. The shuttle's ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss, and Lyra got her first look at the human envoy. Jax Marlowe was disappointing. Average height, unremarkable build, with dark hair that showed premature streaks of gray. He wore a simple diplomatic uniform devoid of ornamentation and moved with what Lyra could only describe as careful deliberation. Not the fluid grace of a warrior, but the measured steps of someone perpetually aware of their surroundings. "Welcome to Archeris," Elder Sky Whisper intoned, her voice carrying the authority of 7 decades of leadership. The Skyward clan's matriarch stood at the front of the delegation, her ceremonial bow held in gnarled but steady hands. "We trust your journey was without incident. Thank you for your hospitality," Jax replied, his voice carrying an unexpected depth. "The journey was long but enlightening. Your world is even more beautiful than the holovids suggested." Lyra suppressed a snort. Holovids, as if their culture could be captured in recorded images. She studied the human more closely, noting the way his eyes moved constantly, taking in details without seeming to stare. There was something unsettling about that gaze, a quality she couldn't quite define. "You arrive at an auspicious time," Elder Sky Whisper continued. "Tomorrow begins the trial of 12, our most sacred competition. Perhaps you would honor us by observing." "I would be honored," Jax said, then paused. "In fact, if it would not be presumptuous, I would like to participate on my world. We have a saying, to understand a people, walk in their shoes, or in this case, perhaps, draw their bow." A ripple of surprise ran through the assembled crowd. The trial of 12 was not merely a competition, it was a ritual that determined social standing, settled disputes, and served as the ultimate test of an archer's skill. For an off-worlder to participate was unprecedented. "The trial is dangerous," ground-bound Chief Earthstrider warned. Stepping forward, his scarred face told stories of survival that no Skyward archer could match. 12 of our finest archers, each with their own style, each potentially lethal. It is not for the untrained. "I understand the risks," Jax said calmly, "but I believe actions speak louder than words. If I am to negotiate an alliance between your world and the Galactic Alliance, should I not demonstrate my commitment to understanding your ways?" Elder Sky Whisper and Chief Earthstrider exchanged glances. Lyra could see the calculation in their eyes, the political advantage of accepting versus the potential diplomatic disaster if the human was injured or killed. "Very well," Elder Sky Whisper declared. "You may participate in tomorrow's trial. Lyra Skyborn, our reigning champion, will ensure you understand the rules and protocols." Lyra's eyes widened. "Elder, surely our finest archer can spare time to educate our guest," the Elder interrupted, her tone brooking no argument. "Consider it part of your duties as champion." Stormwing sensed her displeasure and ruffled her feathers. Letting out a low chirp of sympathy, Lyra forced a smile and stepped forward, offering a perfunctory bow to the human. "I am at your service, Envoy Marlowe. Though I should warn you, the trial of 12 has claimed lives even among our own people. Your courage is admirable, but courage without skill is merely elaborate suicide." Jax met her gaze steadily. "I appreciate your concern, Champion Skyborn. I assure you, I have no intention of dying tomorrow. Though I must admit, I'm curious about these 12 archers. Would you tell me about them as you show me the grounds?" As they walked away from the landing platform, Lyra found herself grudgingly impressed by the human's questions. He asked not about the rules or scoring, but about the history of the trial, the significance of each archer's position, the symbolic meaning behind the number 12. His queries revealed a depth of preparation that contradicted his unimpressive appearance. "The trial dates back to the Sundering," Lyra explained as they approached the ceremonial arena. When our ancestors first colonized Arcturus, they were one people. But disagreements over how to adapt to this world split them. The Skyward clan took to the platforms, believing that elevation brought them closer to perfection. The ground-bound tribes remained below, insisting that true strength came from connection to the earth. The arena itself was a marvel of organic architecture, grown rather than built. It consisted of intertwining crystal trees that had been coaxed over centuries into a natural amphitheater. Platforms at various heights provided shooting positions for the 12 archers, while the challengers' path wound through the center, a killing ground with minimal cover. For generations, our people warred, Lyra continued, until finally, exhausted by bloodshed, our ancestors created the trial. 12 archers, 6 from each culture, would test any who claimed the right to lead or settle major disputes. It ended the wars but preserved our martial traditions. And you are the current champion, Jax observed. How many trials have you won? 7, Lyra said with pride. I've held the title since I was 16. Tomorrow will be my 8th victory. You seem very confident. Confidence born from skill, not arrogance, she replied, then paused. Well, perhaps a little arrogance. But when you can put an arrow through a falling leaf at 300 meters, a certain amount of pride is justified. Jax smiled at that, the first genuine expression she'd seen from him. On my world, we have a story about pride, but perhaps that's a conversation for another time. Tell me about the 12 archers I'll face. As they circled the arena, Lyra described each position. The first 2 were traditionally held by promising newcomers, dangerous but not yet elite. The 3rd and 4th positions belonged to the twin brothers, skyward archers who had developed an uncanny ability to coordinate their shots. The 5th was reserved for the ground-bound's master of camouflage, so skilled at hiding that victims often never saw the arrow coming. The 6th position changes each trial, Lyra explained. Sometimes it's our strongest youth, sometimes an elder proving they still have skill. The 7th is always held by someone using specialized ammunition, poison, explosive, or seeker arrows. Seeker arrows? Jax asked. Bioengineered projectiles with limited sentience. Once fired, they can make minor course corrections to follow their target. Very expensive and difficult to produce, so each archer only gets 1 per trial. They continued through the positions, each more dangerous than the last. The 8th used a great bow with draw weight that could punch through armor. The 9th was a master of trick shots, arrows that curved around obstacles or split mid-flight. The 10th commanded not 1 but 3 arrowhawks, turning the sky itself into a weapon. The 11th is our eldest active archer, Lyra said as they approached the final platform. Master Windreader has participated in over 100 trials. He's slow now, but his experience makes him deadly. He reads the challengers' patterns, predicts their movements. And the 12th? Jax asked, though from his expression, he already knew. The 12th is reserved for the reigning champion, Lyra confirmed. Me. Though traditionally, few challengers make it that far. The trial ends when the challenger is struck by an arrow or voluntarily yields. What if they dodge all the 12? Lyra laughed, the sound carrying across the arena. Dodge all 12? Envoy Marlowe, in the 1,000-year history of the trial, only 7 challengers have made it past the 9th archer. Only 2 have faced the 11th. None have ever faced the 12th and survived. There's a first time for everything, Jax said mildly. You truly believe you can dodge 12 of our finest archers? You, who moves like you're walking through thick mud. Lyra's amusement was genuine now. I've seen off-worlders before. Your reflexes are slow, your movements predictable. You'll be lucky to dodge 1 arrow, let alone 12. Perhaps you're right, Jax acknowledged. But I've found that sometimes the best way to avoid danger is not to be where it expects you to be. That night, Lyra attended the ceremonial feast in the humans' honor. She watched him carefully, noting how he sampled each dish with apparent enjoyment, how he listened more than he spoke, how his questions drew out information without seeming intrusive. There was a quality to him she couldn't define, a stillness that went beyond mere calm. During a lull in conversation, she found herself sitting beside him on the observation balcony, looking out over the crystal forest as it sparkled in the light of Archeris's 3 moons. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. Why are you really doing this?" "The trial. I mean, your mission would succeed or fail regardless of whether you participate." Jax was quiet for a long moment. "Have you ever been in a situation where everyone underestimated you? Where they looked at you and saw only weakness?" "No," Lyra admitted. "I've been recognized as gifted since childhood." "Then you've been fortunate," he said. "On my world, I was considered insufficient, too slow for military service, too unimpressive for leadership. I became a diplomat because it was one of the few paths available to someone like me. And yet here you are, representing your entire alliance." "Yes," Jax agreed. "Here I am, sometimes, champion Skyborn. The greatest strength is in letting others see only weakness. Tomorrow, your people will expect me to fail quickly and spectacularly. Perhaps they're right, but perhaps they'll learn what I learned long ago, that there's more than one way to see the world." The next morning dawned clear and bright. Perfect conditions for the trial. The arena filled early, spectators from both cultures claiming positions along the grown crystal viewing galleries. The sound of 1,000 conversations created a constant buzz, punctuated by the cries of arrowhawks circling overhead. Lyra took her position on the 12th platform, checking her equipment with practiced efficiency. Her bow, Whisperwind, had been in her family for 6 generations. Its composite construction incorporated crystal fibers that resonated with her shots, adding speed and stability to each arrow. Her quiver held 30 arrows, each perfectly balanced and fletched with Stormwing's own feathers. From her elevated position, she watched Jax enter the arena. He wore simple clothing, a fitted shirt and pants that wouldn't snag on obstacles. Soft boots that would allow quick movement. No armor, which drew murmurs from the crowd. Even training armor could deflect a glancing blow, but the human had chosen mobility over protection. Elder Sky Whisper's voice rang out, amplified by the arena's natural acoustics. "Today, we witness something unprecedented. Jax Marlowe, envoy of the Galactic Alliance, has chosen to face the trial of 12. This is not merely a test of skill, but a bridge between worlds. Let all who witness remember this day, regardless of its outcome." The crowd fell silent as the first archer, a young ground-bound woman named Terra, took her position. She was new to the trial, having earned her spot just months before. Lyra could see the tension in her shoulders, the slight tremor in her draw hand. First position was an honor, but also a burden. The archer who started the trial bore responsibility for setting its tone. Jax stood in the center of the challenger's circle, a marked area 10 meters in diameter. The rules were simple. He could move anywhere within the arena, but each archer would only shoot when he was in clear view. No hiding behind full cover indefinitely. It was a test of evasion, not concealment. Terra drew her bow, the arrow's tip gleaming in the morning sun. The crowd held its breath. She released. The arrow flew true, aimed at center mass, a traditional opening shot meant to test the challenger's basic reflexes. Jax shifted his weight, a movement so small it barely seemed intentional. The arrow passed close enough to ruffle his shirt, but struck nothing but air. A murmur ran through the crowd. Lucky. Some said, a fluke. The second archer, a young skyward man, didn't wait for the crowd to settle. His arrow came from a different angle, faster and lower. Jax stumbled, actually stumbled, and the arrow passed over his lowered shoulder. Lyra laughed. the sound carrying clearly in the morning air. "Lucky to dodge one arrow," she called out, her voice pitched to carry. "Let's see how long that luck holds." The crowd took up her mood, some laughing, others placing bets on which archer would end the embarrassment. Lyra settled back to watch, certain she wouldn't need to string her bow. The twin brothers took their positions for the third and fourth shots. These two had trained together since childhood, developing an almost telepathic coordination. They drew in perfect synchronization. Their arrows aimed to create a kill box, one high, one low, timed to arrive at the same instant. Jax stood still until the last possible moment, then dropped to one knee while leaning hard to the right. It was an ugly movement, lacking any grace, but it threaded him through the narrow gap between the arrows. One passed over his left shoulder, the other by his right hip, so close that Lyra saw him flinch. "Interesting," Master Theron murmured from his position beside her platform. "Did you see his eyes?" "What about them?" Lyra asked, still amused by the human's ungainly movements. "He closed them. Just before he moved, he closed his eyes." Lyra frowned, focusing more intently on the challenger. The fifth archer, Master Shadowstep, had vanished into the arena's natural blind spots. This was his specialty, firing from concealment, giving the challenger no visual warning. Even experienced warriors struggled against Shadowstep's technique. The arena fell silent, everyone straining to spot the hidden archer. Jax stood in the center of his circle, shoulders relaxed, breathing steady. Then Lyra saw it. His eyes drifted shut. Not a blink, but a deliberate closing, as if he were trying to sleep standing up. The arrow came from behind a crystal growth, fired through a gap barely wide enough for the shaft to pass. It should have been impossible to detect, let alone dodge. But Jax was already moving, swaying left in a motion that seemed almost accidental. The arrow whispered past his ribs. "How?" someone in the crowd shouted. "He couldn't see it." The sixth archer, a ground-bound elder named Earth Song, took her shot without flourish. Her style was simple, direct, effective, qualities that had served her through 50 years of survival. Her arrow flew straight and true. Again. Jax closed his eyes. Again. He moved at the last instant, a slight turn of his torso that let the arrow pass harmlessly by. Lyra's amusement was fading, replaced by curiosity. She'd seen blind fighting techniques before, warriors who trained to combat in darkness. But this was different. Jax wasn't fighting. He was simply not there when the arrows arrived. The seventh archer stepped forward, and the crowd's energy shifted. Toxin was infamous for her specialized ammunition. Today's selection gleamed with an oily sheen. Paralytic poison that would drop a challenger in seconds. Non-lethal, but utterly debilitating. "Now it ends," someone behind Lyra muttered. "No one dodges Toxin's shots." The poisoned arrow flew in a slight arc, the extra weight of the toxin-coated head altering its trajectory. Jax stood motionless, eyes closed, until it was nearly upon him. Then he twisted, a motion that looked more like a stretch than an evasion. The arrow passed so close that Lyra saw a drop of poison flick from the head onto his shirt. But it missed. The crowd's murmur grew to a roar. 7 arrows dodged, already more than most challengers managed. Betting shifted wildly as spectators reassessed the strange human. The 8th archer wielded a great bow that required mechanical assistance to draw. The arrow it fired was more like a small spear, capable of punching through stone. The archer aimed low, knowing that the massive projectile's speed made aerial evasion nearly impossible. Jax's response was unlike anything Lyra had seen. He didn't dodge, he fell. Not a controlled drop or tactical roll, but what looked like his legs simply giving out. The great arrow passed through where his center mass had been, slamming into the arena wall with enough force to crack the crystal. Did he faint? Lyra asked incredulously. No, Master Theron said slowly. Watch him rise. See how his muscles never truly relaxed? That fall was intentional, but disguised as weakness. The ninth archer, trick-shot Marie, was already drawing. Her arrows were legendary for their impossible trajectories. She fired at a crystal surface, the arrow ricocheting at an angle that would bring it to Jax from his blind spot. But Jax was already moving. Eyes closed. He stepped forward and left, positioning himself so that the ricocheted arrow passed behind him. It was as if he knew the arrow's path before Marie had even chosen her angle. This is impossible, Lyra breathed. No one can predict trick shots' angles. She calculates them in the moment based on wind, temperature, even humidity. And yet, Theron observed, he does. The 10th archer commanded 3 arrowhawks, each carrying modified arrows. The birds attacked from different angles, releasing their projectiles in a coordinated assault that had never been successfully evaded. Jax dropped to the ground, rolling in a pattern that seemed random but somehow threaded him through the converging arrows. One passed over his back, another beside his hip, the third where his head had been a split second before. The arena erupted. 10 arrows dodged. It was unprecedented, impossible, yet undeniable. Lyra found herself leaning forward, studying the human with new intensity. His movements were ugly, graceless, lacking any martial elegance. But they worked. Master Windreader took his position for the 11th shot. At 90 years old, he moved with careful deliberation, but his eyes remained sharp as the arrows he fired. His gift was pattern recognition, finding the rhythm in a challenger's movements and exploiting it. For the first time, Jax remained completely still. He stood in the center of his circle, eyes closed, breathing so shallow his chest barely moved. Windredder studied him for long moments. Arrow nocked, but not drawn. Why doesn't he shoot? Someone whispered. Because there's no pattern to read, Lyra realized. The human isn't moving, isn't even tensing. There's nothing to predict. Finally, Windredder drew and fired in one smooth motion, aiming for where instinct told him Jax would dodge. But Jax didn't dodge. He simply leaned backward, letting gravity pull him out of the arrow's path. It was the minimum possible movement, so small that some spectators missed it entirely. The crowd's roar was deafening. 11 arrows evaded. One more, and the impossible would become reality. Lyra stood, whisper wind singing as she drew it in one fluid motion. Her arrow was already nocked, her body aligned in perfect form. This was her moment, her shot, her reputation on the line. She studied the human, noting every detail. The slight favor of his left leg, an old injury, perhaps. The way he breathed through his nose, counting the rhythm. The minute tension in his shoulders that suggested readiness despite his relaxed posture. You've done well. Envoy, she called out, her voice cutting through the crowd noise. But this is where your journey ends. I am Lyra Skyborn, and I do not miss. She drew, feeling Whisperwind's power coursing through the weapon. The bow had been crafted to match her perfectly, its draw weight at the exact limit of her strength. The arrow she'd chosen was her finest, fletched with Stormwing's primary feathers, its head forged from star metal that would fly true regardless of wind. Time seemed to slow as she aimed. The crowd fell silent, understanding they were witnessing history. Either the human would accomplish the impossible, or the champion would preserve the trial's 1,000-year tradition. Lyra released. The arrow flew like bottled lightning, faster than any shot she'd ever made. It split the air with a sound like tearing silk, aimed at the exact center of Jax's chest. At this range, with this speed, evasion should have been impossible. Jax stood perfectly still, eyes closed, as death approached. Then, At the last possible instant, a heartbeat before impact, he twisted. Not a dodge or leap, but a rotation of his torso that moved his center line just enough. The arrow passed through the space where his heart had been, close enough to slice the fabric of his shirt. For a moment, the arena was silent. Then pandemonium erupted. Lyra stood frozen, her bow still raised, unable to process what had happened. She hadn't missed. The arrow had gone exactly where she'd aimed, but somehow, impossibly, the human hadn't been there when it arrived. 12! Someone screamed. He dodged all 12! The crowd surged forward, held back only by the arena's barrier crystals. Members of both cultures were shouting, arguing, celebrating. The impossible had happened. A slow, unremarkable human had defeated the trial of 12. Lyra found herself descending from her platform without conscious decision, drawn by something she couldn't name. She pushed through the crowd until she faced Jax, who stood calmly in his circle as chaos swirled around them. "How?" she demanded. "That shot was perfect. No one could have dodged it." Jax opened his eyes, and Lyra gasped. His pupils were dilated so wide the irises were mere rings. As she watched, they slowly contracted to normal size. "You asked if I'd ever been underestimated," he said quietly. "What I didn't mention was why. 10 years ago, I was caught in an ambush on Kepler-42. Pirates using neural disruptors, weapons that shut down the visual cortex. I was blind for 3 days, hunted through a ship's corridors by killers I couldn't see. But you survived," Lyra said. "I survived by learning to see differently. The human body processes thousands of sensory inputs every second. Air pressure, temperature variations, electromagnetic fields, micro vibrations. The brain usually ignores them in favor of visual data. But when you can't see," he shrugged, "you learn to feel an arrow's approach in the air it displaces. You sense the electromagnetic signature of biotech weapons. You recognize the pattern of a drawn bow in the subtle sounds it makes. So you were never slow." Lyra realized. "You were just processing differently." "Speed is relative," Jax agreed. "You are faster than me in every measurable way, but I don't need to be fast if I'm not where the arrow is aimed. And I can feel where it's aimed before it's fired." Lyra stood silent for a long moment, her worldview reshaping itself. Everything she'd believed about strength, speed, superiority, all of it called into question by this quiet human who saw with his whole body. "Teach me," she said suddenly. Jax blinked in surprise. "What?" "Teach me to see as you see and to feel what you feel." She met his gaze steadily. "I've spent my life mastering one way of perceiving the world. You've shown me there's another. I would be a fool not to learn." A slow smile spread across Jax's face. "I would be honored. Champion Skyborn. Though I should warn you, the training is difficult, and it requires something that might be harder for you than any physical challenge." "What's that?" "Humility. The acceptance that everything you know might be only half the truth." Lyra laughed, surprising herself with the sound's genuine warmth. "After today, Envoy Marlowe, humility comes easier than you might think." The crowd's chaos slowly organized itself into celebration. Elder Sky Whisper and Chief Earth Strider jointly declared the trial complete, acknowledging Jax's unprecedented achievement. The diplomatic implications were staggering. An off-worlder had not only survived their most sacred challenge, but had revealed new possibilities within it. That evening, as feast preparations began, Lyra found herself walking with Jax through the crystal forest. Stormwing perched on her shoulder, occasionally chirping observations that seemed directed at the human. "Your arrowhawk is remarkable," Jax said. "The bond you share, it's unlike anything in the Alliance." "It's dying," Lyra admitted, surprising herself with the confession. "Not Stormwing specifically, but the entire system. The bioengineers who created the arrowhawks left incomplete notes. Each generation is slightly less capable than the last. In a century, maybe two, they'll be ordinary birds again. The Alliance has excellent genetic engineers, Jax offered. Perhaps that's exactly why you're here, Lyra interrupted. Trade agreements, technology exchange, mutual benefit. I understand politics better than you might think. But after today, she paused, choosing her words carefully. I believe the exchange might be more equal than our leaders assumed. They walked in comfortable silence until they reached a clearing where young archers practiced. The students had abandoned their usual drills to attempt recreating Jax's feat, closing their eyes, trying to sense incoming projectiles. Their failure was universal and often painful. They're approaching it wrong, Jax observed. They're trying to force new senses rather than simply allowing existing ones to surface. Then show them, Lyra suggested. Show us all. What followed was the strangest archery lesson Lyra had ever witnessed. Jax had the students put away their bows entirely. Instead, he had them stand in pairs. One throwing soft practice balls while the other stood with eyes closed, simply breathing. Don't try to dodge, he instructed. Don't even think about the ball. Think about the air, how it feels on your skin. Think about the sound of your partner's movement. Think about the way light changes behind your eyelids when something passes between you and the sun. Most students failed repeatedly, but one, a young ground-bound girl who'd always been considered too small for combat, suddenly swayed left, allowing a ball to pass harmlessly by. I felt it, she cried, like a pressure wave pushing the air. That's the beginning, Jax confirmed. Now do it again and again, until the feeling becomes as natural as seeing. As the lesson continued, Lyra found herself studying not just the technique, but the teacher. Jax moved among the students with patient encouragement, adjusting stances with gentle touches, offering praise for even minor progress. It was so different from traditional archerist training, which emphasized perfection through repetition and harsh correction. You're a natural teacher, she observed during a break. I had good teachers myself, Jax replied. The pirates who blinded me thought they were taking away my ability to fight. Instead, they gave me a gift, the knowledge that there's always another way to perceive reality. I've spent 10 years sharing that gift with others who felt limited by their circumstances. And now you share it with us. Lyra made a decision. I'll speak to the elders tonight. Your alliance wants a treaty, but I think we need more than that. We need an exchange program. Your teachers learning our techniques, our students discovering new ways to see not just archery, but perception itself. That's ambitious, Jax said carefully. The Alliance proposed a simple trade agreement. The Alliance didn't dodge 12 arrows, Lyra countered. You did. And in doing so, you showed us that our entire worldview might be limited. Do you know what that's worth to a culture that's been slowly stagnating? That night's feast became a planning session. Elder Sky Whisper and Chief Earth Strider, united by witnessing the impossible, worked with Jax to draft frameworks for cultural exchange that went far beyond simple trade. Young archers lined up to volunteer for off-world training. Engineers emerged from seclusion, eager to learn Alliance techniques that might save the Arrowhawks. But it was Lyra who proposed the most radical change. The trial of 12 has stood unchanged for 1,000 years, she announced, standing before the assembled crowd. Today, we learned that tradition can blind us as surely as any physical limitation. I propose we evolve the trial, not abandon it, but expand it. Let there be paths for those who see differently, who succeed through perception rather than speed. The debate that followed was heated but productive. By dawn, they had agreed on new trial formats that would test not just traditional archery, but also the kinds of awareness Jax had demonstrated. The change wouldn't happen overnight, but the seed was planted. In the weeks that followed, Lyra trained with Jax daily. The process was humbling. She who had never failed at anything struggled with even basic sensing exercises, but gradually, she began to feel what he felt. The whisper of air displaced by movement, the electromagnetic tingle of living beings, the pressure waves that preceded fast-moving objects. "You're trying too hard," Jax told her one afternoon as she failed to sense an incoming practice arrow. "Your strength has always been in decisive action, but this requires— passivity isn't the right word. Receptiveness, perhaps. It's like trying to grab water," Lyra complained. "The harder I grasp, the less I hold." "Then don't grasp. Let it flow through you." She closed her eyes, forcing her breathing to steady. Somewhere to her left, Jax knocked an arrow. She could hear the creak of his bow, feel the way his presence changed the air currents in the room. But pinpointing the arrow's path, there, a sensation so faint she almost missed it. The arrow would pass high and to her right. She didn't dodge, that would be trying too hard. She simply allowed her body to settle lower, a natural relaxation that happened to move her out of the arrow's path. The soft practice arrow whispered overhead. "Yes." Jax's excitement was palpable. "That's exactly it. You didn't dodge the arrow, you simply weren't where it was going." "I think I understand," Lyra said slowly. "It's not about being faster than the arrow. It's about being elsewhere when it arrives, moving in harmony with the world rather than in opposition to it." The ancient Earth philosopher Lao Tzu wrote something similar. Jax said, "The sage stays behind, thus he is ahead. He is detached, thus at one with all. Through selfless action, he attains fulfillment." "Philosophy through archery," Lyra mused. "My teachers would be scandalized. They always said thinking too much would slow my draw. And they were right, for the path they taught. But there are many paths to mastery." As her training progressed, Lyra began incorporating her new awareness into her traditional techniques. Her accuracy, already exceptional, became almost supernatural. She could sense minute wind changes, feel the optimal moment to release, predict where a moving target would be with uncanny precision. "You're becoming something new," Master Theron observed one day, watching her practice. "Neither pure skyward nor adopting ground-bound ways. Something that transcends both." "Isn't that what evolution is?" Lyra asked. "Taking the best of what exists and creating something unprecedented?" The real test came 3 months later, when pirates attacked a mining outpost on Archeris' second moon. The raiders used visual disruption fields, making traditional archery nearly useless. But Lyra led a team of students trained in Jax's methods, and they turned the pirates' advantage against them. Fighting blind, guided only by their enhanced awareness, they picked off raiders with impossible accuracy. Lyra herself, combining her speed with her new senses, moved through the battlefield like a force of nature. She didn't need to see enemies to know where they were, didn't need light to place her arrows precisely. The victory celebration was muted by the cost. Several miners had died before help arrived. But the successful defense proved that the new techniques weren't just philosophical exercises. They were practical skills that could save lives. "I should return to the Alliance soon," Jax said that night, standing with Lyra on the observation deck of the lunar facility. "The treaty negotiations are complete, the exchange program established. My mission is finished." "Is it?" Lyra asked. "You came here to forge an alliance, but what you've really done is start a revolution in how we see ourselves. That's not a mission you complete. It's a journey you begin." "The Alliance?" "The Alliance can assign another diplomat to handle routine matters. You're not routine. Jax Marlowe. You're a teacher, a bridge between worlds. We need you here." Jax was quiet for a long moment. "I never expected to find a home among warriors. On my world, I was always the outsider, the one who didn't fit the mold. And here you're the one who broke the mold entirely." Lyra said, "Stay, not as an envoy, but as yourself. Help us continue evolving. Help me continue evolving. That sounds dangerously close to a personal request rather than a diplomatic one, Jax observed with a slight smile. Perhaps it is, Lyra admitted. You showed me there's more than one way to see the world. I'd like to explore what else might be possible when two different perspectives combine. Stormwing chose that moment to land on the railing between them, chirping what sounded suspiciously like approval. The Arrowhawk had taken to Jax over the months, often perching near him during lessons. Even Stormwing agrees. Lyra laughed. And she's an excellent judge of character. How can I argue with such wisdom? Jax reached out carefully to stroke the Arrowhawk's feathers, a gesture that would have cost most strangers a finger. Very well. I'll stay. Though I should warn you, I have many more impossible things to teach. Good, Lyra said firmly. We've been possible for too long. It's time Archerists learned to be impossible. 6 months later, the new Trial of 12 drew contestants from across the galaxy. The format had evolved to include not just traditional archery, but tests of perception, awareness, and adaptive thinking. Humans competed alongside Arcarians, each bringing their own strengths and perspectives. Lyra stood as chief judge, watching a young skyward archer attempt the blindfold challenge, dodging arrows while deprived of sight. The boy was struggling, his movements too rigid, too dependent on where he thought attacks should come from rather than where they were. Relax, she called out. Don't think about the arrows. Think about the space between them. Find the stillness within motion. The boy's stance shifted subtly, and he successfully evaded the next shot. Not perfect, but progress. He learns quickly, Jax observed, joining her on the platform. He wore the hybrid clothing they'd developed together, Archerian style adapted for human physiology, marked with the insignia of the Cross-World Training Academy they'd founded. He has good teachers, Lyra replied. Speaking of which, the Alliance sent another request for you to return for a formal debrief. I told them you were too busy revolutionizing an entire culture to bother with paperwork. I'm sure they appreciated your diplomatic phrasing, Jax said dryly. Though technically, we're revolutionizing multiple cultures. I got word this morning that 3 more worlds want to join the exchange program. And so the revolution spreads, Lyra mused. All because one slow human showed us that speed isn't everything. All because one proud champion was humble enough to learn, Jax countered. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Lyra, you're the bridge that made everything else possible. She smiled at that, remembering the arrogant young woman who'd laughed at the idea of a human surviving the trial. That person seemed like a stranger now, limited by assumptions she hadn't even known she carried. We've come far, she agreed. But there's farther still to go. I've been thinking about your sensory techniques combined with our bioengineering. What if we could enhance natural perception without losing the ability to choose? Create Arrowhawks that help their partners see in new ways. Always pushing boundaries, Jax said with fond exasperation. What happened to the archer who believed in simple superiority through speed? She learned that true superiority comes from accepting there's always more to learn, Lyra replied. A slow human taught her that. Perhaps you've heard of him. Their laughter echoed across the arena as the new trial continued below. Young archers from a dozen worlds tested themselves against challenges that would have been unimaginable a year ago. Some moved with blinding speed, others with careful deliberation. Some kept their eyes wide open, others closed them to see more clearly. All of them were learning that perception shaped reality, that strength came in many forms, that the impossible was just another word for untried. And in the crystal forests of Archerists, where tradition and innovation danced together like wind through singing trees, the revolution continued, one arrow, one breath, one moment of clarity at a time. The future stretched before them, bright with promise and rich with challenge. There would be setbacks. Certainly, cultural evolution was never smooth. And there were those on both Archerus and in the Alliance who resisted change. But as Lyra watched the young archers below struggle and succeed in equal measure, she felt the deep satisfaction of someone who had found their true path. "What are you thinking?" Jax asked, recognizing her contemplative mood. "I'm thinking about perception," she said. "How I once saw you as slow and weak, how you saw yourself as insufficient, how wrong we both were, and how right we were to learn better. 'The first step to wisdom is admitting ignorance,'" Jax quoted, another Earth philosopher. "A universal truth. I think," Lyra turned to face him fully, "I'm also thinking about the future. The Alliance wants to establish similar programs on other worlds. They'll need instructors who understand both perspectives, traditional mastery and expanded awareness. Are you volunteering?" "I'm suggesting we both volunteer, partners in teaching as we've been partners in learning." She paused, then added with characteristic directness, "And perhaps partners in other ways as well, if you're interested." Jax's smile was answer enough, but he spoke anyway. "I've learned to see in the dark, feel the displacement of air, sense the electromagnetic signatures of living beings, but I think learning to see the world through your eyes might be the greatest challenge yet." "Good," Lyra said, taking his hand. "I do so hate it when things are too easy." Above them, Stormwing circled in the afternoon sky, her cry echoing off the crystal trees. It sounded like laughter, or perhaps like joy, the sound of evolution itself, endless and ongoing, carrying the promise of wonders yet to be discovered. And in the arena below, another student closed their eyes and found a new way to see.